We were pulling these 210 Vera plows, and you just going 4.5 mile an hour, and it was so hard to pull. It was so compacted. I just think there's so many wins with no-till that simple way of farming.
I don't like pecking rocks any more than anybody else does either. So. Or working ground. It seems like such a needless thing.
Hello and welcome to another session of Winning with No-Till. So we're here in Port Hope at Hunco Farms, and we're going to get started and go through a series of questions and have a conversation about how Hunco Farms has become quite a no-till enterprise. So I'm here with Jason and Kevin, and if one of you can talk about who's involved in the business, and the other can talk about the history to the no-till.
Yeah, I'm Jason. I've worked here, be 25 years next year. Kevin, he's worked here for pushing 40 years. And then we have another guy, Phil, he's worked here for 1.5 years. Kevin's brother helps us with the grain buggy. And if we can find a guy to truck, we do. My son helped this spring, in the summertime with wheat running the buggy. So we do get a little bit of extra help, but most of the daily goings on is the three of us.
How about where you started and where you are today in terms of your journey to no-till?
Well, I guess we had a guy come to us in 1990 or 91, and he wanted to plant a bit of wheat. So he planted 19 acres of a 60-acre field, and we could see something there. So the next spring, we rented a drill and planted 35 acres of oat. And that fall, we used that guy's drill again and planted it to wheat. That's never been touched other than a little bit of fix-up stuff there. So we bought our first no-till drill in 93, but 92 was so wet here as it was across a lot of the province and maybe this part of the country anyways. So we had all this corn, and we had a whole bunch of sweet corn that never put cobs on it, and we were growing vegetables at that time, and we couldn't get any fall tillage done, so we took a chance that we would try no-till in the spring, and it worked. Initially, we're going to just no-till our sand ground and always work this heavier ground down here, but it works so good. That's maybe the only good thing that came out of 92 was learning that we could work down here with no-till.
And who was this fellow that came with this idea? Was he another farmer or a business person?
I think it was just us guys that worked here. There was other guys around the neighborhood that were doing a bit of no-till, and we just thought this would really help us on this sand land, because we had an erosion problem everywhere here. We had the sand land, we worked it so much that we couldn't save any moisture, and stones. We had a lot of stones.
Nobody likes to pick those.
We'd all pick stones if that was a job that was always waiting for somebody.
So can one of you talk about the soil types and the slopes that you deal with here across the acreage that you operate?
I guess the majority of the soil down along the lake here is a Smithfield silt loam, and the stuff to the north is a Dundonald sandy loam.
And on sort of drumlins for the most part.
Yes, drumlins, but yeah, there's a bit of everything up there. There's gravel and there's white sand.
And so in this breakdown of soils across the acreage that you farm, what's important to manage those soils that no-till has benefited you with?
Well, erosion problems on the real problem areas. We do have a few spots where we grass waterway stuff that you cannot farm because it will erode, even with no-till.
Have you removed some grass waterways?
We have.
Because the no-till has prevented the water from running? Okay, can you talk about what crops are growing on the farm and the rotation that you use for those crops, and how that supports the no-till system?
Well, we grow corn, soybeans, and wheat in that rotation. And we try to do that 3 rotation, do the corn, beans, and then wheat, and then follow it. After the wheat is off, we plant cover crop in all the wheat fields. There is some fields that don't get that 3-way rotation, but majority
because of soil type?
Yeah, not really soil type. Like that field you have on there, for instance, of the combine and the corn, is just the way it slopes. It slopes to the, I guess you'd say, to the north,
Yeah.
and it will not grow wheat.
So oftentimes people have a reason for being in no-till, and I guess just what is your reason for Hunco Farms to be a no-till farm when you're still quite a minority across the province? Just talk about why and what's the mindset that gives you guys the courage to be no-tillers.
Well, I think maybe we were poor conventional farmers. This land, especially this land down here, if you worked it just a little bit too wet, you could see them marks for years. We were in that vegetable business growing peas and sweet corn and lima beans. They were always pushing to get this stuff in. So we seen the damage that compaction could do, and said they had this yield drag. We never had a yield drag, and it just seemed to work for us.
And Kevin, you said when you were starting into the no-till journey, you were still in vegetables. Were you growing some of the vegetables under no-till?
Combine, we harvested peas here, and the best peas we ever combined the whole time I was with them was a no-till field of peas.
And what about the mindset, Jason? What's it take to have the confidence to just do this?
I came from a dairy farm, so it was all work ground. And when I first started here, I thought they were crazy looking at like all the trash in the field and how is this going to work? But once you saw how it did work, it's so easy to do now.
Okay.
It just, you look at people that work ground and why?
Okay.
When it works so nice.
Yep. Awesome. Let's talk about the cover crops a little bit more specifically. Why do you cover crop?
Soil health, moisture retention, weed control.
And when, relative to when you started no-tilling, when did cover crops come in to be part of the process?
2015, we started cover crops. We were the very first field of corn we no-tilled. We rented a planter off a guy, and he come and he said, "You got everything good here, other than this field should have been sprayed. It should be brown." For 20 years, we made sure when we went into wheat stubble that it was brown. And then 2015, we thought, well, let's try planting green, and we got along fairly good at it. We've had to thin our cover crop out. The first year we were way too thick, but we just learned from other guys to thin it out. As long as there's something growing there, I think it's holding nutrients and it's holding the soil together. Yeah.
And so that's really about the last 10 years, but you've been doing no-till for quite a bit longer than that. Have you seen a significant change in the the status of the fields as cover crops have become more a part of that no-till system?
On our sandier land, yes. It's moved that, like, no-till stopped most of the erosion up there, but we still had some erosion, and the knolls and stuff never really got any better. But with cover crops, it's even them fields up a tremendous amount. The field right to the north of where we're sitting here, we left a strip in there in 2015 that we've never had cover crop on. And I wish we'd have left that strip in a strip of our poorest ground to show the difference. Like, we left it on our best ground, and it hasn't hurt it. It's been a good learning experience. Like, everybody said we would lose growing planting green, and the last time we checked with corn, we had a 4 bushel advantage on the green over the non-cover crop.
And what species are part of the mix there? And has it evolved over the 10 years you've been using them?
Yeah, I guess the first year we had just broadcast oats and peas, right? And then we've gone to a multi-species mix now that we have changed, like added or subtracted some stuff, and rates have changed on stuff to where we are now, which is oats, rye, peas, crimson clover, sunflowers, buckwheat, sorghum.
But there isn't very much any of that stuff.
Understood. What's the total rate of the mixture seeded?
It's about 15 pounds of rye, 15 pounds of oats, and then the rest adds up to about 5 pounds. So about 35
Oh.
pounds at total to the baker.
Does it change at all, the recipe change as a function of whether you're in a really dry or wet time when you're planting them?
No,
No. Okay.
I guess we haven't really adjusted it.
It's something that we'd like to, but we mix it all in one big batch, and it just keeps it simple.
And do you mix it yourselves? You get those individual ingredients in, or do you buy a mixture?
We have been growing our own oats and rye, and then buying in the other stuff, and then just we put it all in the grain buggy, from the grain buggy to a truck, back to the grain buggy, and then just in the wagons, and that seems to mix it enough.
Where in the system do cover crops fit for Hunco Farms? Like just after wheat harvest, you're trying to do anything after soybeans? Most of that's going to wheat.
If we have enough rye seed, we have spread it with our potash on the earlier fields of corn, and we've had actually really good results with that. Never gets real high in the fall. Sometimes you never see it in the fall, but it's there in the spring. The fields that we do that on are easier to keep clean when it's planted back to soybean.
And when does termination happen, or how does termination happen? You've got some overwintering species there.
We kill it after it's planted is ideal, right?
Yeah, that's ideal. We made a rule here a couple of years ago that if we put all our nitrogen on wheat and don't make a mark, we should soon start thinking about terminating it because it's robbing moisture. But that's just guess. That's just guesswork, really.
And have you had some people talk about if they've sprayed it off too early and then they couldn't get planted and it got wet or something, then it wasn't going to draw that moisture away.
We've had it like last year, we sprayed a little bit early, and then we had a field right out in front of the elevator here. We left, and when Phil planted it, he said that was the nicest field that he planted. Like anything that was green planted really nice. Anything that was turned yellow was tough to plant through. But then he finished in that field, and it was tall and lush, and it just planted like planting in the cake.
So it's interesting as I've talking to the no-till team in the development of the Crop Chat series, the number of people who absolutely have no tillage on the farm and others that have some amount of tillage somewhere in the system. So can you talk about, in terms of Hunco Farms, is there places on the farm where tillage has to happen? And if so, why?
We do have the odd spot that might wash, or a spot that maybe got rutted up in the fall that you'd have to do something with in the spring. As a rule, all the tillage equipment gets pulled out of the shed and parked in the yard, and it doesn't move all spring if possible.
That's the goal, for
Yeah.
sure.
But there is always a few spots that need a touch up.
Where are you guys in terms of the acreage that you farm drain? Do you have tile drain pretty much everything? Are you still doing tile draining on some fields where that needs to be leveled up and stuff?
Yes, anywhere most of this ground is tiled, I guess.
Pretty well 100% tiled, other than a couple little rented places that should be tiled. We've had them long enough. We should have tiled them the first year we had them, but I bet that story's been said 1,000 times.
But yes, we do work. If you do tile, you obviously have to tidy it up, right?
Now, one example was last summer in the field where we did the compaction event, and you didn't get a very good take of the cover crops there.
Yeah.
And after the event, you did end up working that down a little bit and replanting. Any explanation of why the cover crops didn't perform there?
I think it was just planted it too shallow, and we didn't have any moisture.
So what implements do you use for tillage when you have to do that?
I guess a disc and an RTS just to level it up.
So let's go back to the no-till system and let's talk about what are the essential implements that Hunco Farms has that make the no-till system work. And one thing I want you to address is like, how many tractors in that do you have? Because if you were tilling, you'd have to have significantly more tractors to be able to pull things and people to run everything. So let's talk about that a little bit. So what implements are part of the farm, and can you sort of say which ones is the most important?
I guess we have 2 tractors that plant and a self-propelled sprayer, which them 3 things are very important, and Then we just have a couple loader tractors for moving wagons around and pushing trees off. But yeah, it's not near the equipment here that there was when we worked all this ground. Yeah.
Like, what's the most important? Is the planter the most important thing? Is the sprayer the most important thing in making the whole system work? Or are they have equal value and they just have to be top notch to work?
I think they're all three things are equal value. You got to have each to make each work.
And in your system with the labor and the equipment that you have, if the conditions are right, are you planting corn and soybeans at the same time? Or do you get all the corn in and then switch?
If conditions are perfect, we will start one day on corn, get it rolling, and then yes, the next day the soybeans are going. Kevin's right behind with the sprayer, and he's not long getting behind.
Let's talk a little bit about the logistics. Is the logistics in no-till any different than what you can remember from the conventional days, or things have changed so much?
Yeah. Well, the combine capacity has increased so much since our conventional tillage days. Yeah, we need more trucks definitely to keep stuff away from the combines, and yields have increased so much. That's not all due to no-till, it's genetics mainly. No, a lot of that stuff we used to get along with a tandem truck, and we used our old tender truck from the fertilizer plant to draw our crops, and we could keep up to a combine with a little wee old grain buggy.
And can you talk about the reason why you have two combines, but you don't use two combines in all cases?
Yeah, we use two for corn, or sorry, two for soybeans and wheat, and one in corn, and then just alternate them to keep the hours kind of relatively the same. Trucks is another thing. Like to run two combines in corn, you need so much infrastructure to keep everything moving. Where the way we run it now with a couple straight trucks and a set of hopper trailers, you can keep everything just keeps flowing. Nobody's really sitting very long if they are sitting. But yes, if you ran two in corn, for sure, you'd need a lot more manpower and equipment.
So two combines in wheat and soybeans versus one in corn. On acres per day harvested, are you about equal, or corn is slower, but it's at a time of year you're not really worried about?
Yeah, corn is slower, definitely slower, but like Jason says, if we just couldn't keep it away from them. We had two combines for quite a while. We did a lot of custom work, and then we quit doing custom work. So that's kind of we got spoiled with having two combines.
Can we talk a little bit about, because you bought a new planter this past year, and the drill's got to be relatively new as well. In purchasing those units, are they a different unit that than you would have purchased if you were in conventional tillage?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
You wouldn't need a no-till machine if you're not going to no-till.
They're more robust planters. They have different stuff on them than
Yeah.
you would have purchased for the straight conventional.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the key components of the system beyond the equipment? Like, one thing is that residue management has got to be really important. Talk about residue management off the back of the combine in wheat, soybeans, and corn that makes the system work when you go to plant.
Spreading is ideal. You've got to do the best job you can spreading that residue especially in the no-till. And we every couple years change the knives on the combines and make on the choppers and make sure that they are sharp, especially for planting wheat. Because like with soybeans, you get those long stalks and they are hard to cut, and they are hard to cut through to plant.
And they don't really dry really well because of the cool, damp
Right.
evenings and stuff like that. So
Yeah. And
okay.
keeping the blades on the seed drill in top-notch condition is key
Okay.
for cutting through that residue to get a good seed bed or a good seed placement.
Gotta tap ourselves on the shoulder and remind ourselves that we could do another hour at night when we're combining soybeans. We see it the next year in the wheat if you do that. So like these big combines now, like you can grind a lot of stuff through them, but it shows in the straw. The the residue is, like Jason says, is so tough to plant through. And we still do that once in a while. You get a wet fall where you finally get a day you can combine, and then you're out there pushing, and the dew falls, and you do another truckload. Let's do one more truckload, and then when you're putting the herbicide on the wheat the next spring, you can see exactly. But it saved us one more truckload of wheat to harvest.
Can you talk about the off season and what the equipment goes through in terms of setup and maintenance in the shop? How important is that to making the whole no-till system work?
Well, it's very important. We bring each piece in and go over it and put on what pieces need to be put on to get that back to that top notch.
And so compared to others, do you think you're changing stuff, more often to keep it almost a new planter all the time?
Maybe so. I don't know. We have our way we do it, and other people have their way of doing stuff. And
Can we talk about the timing? Are you finding yourselves planting delays compared to neighbors that are tilling and stuff? Or is the time that they're out tilling the same time that you're planting and such? Like, what other pieces of the puzzle mean that no-till works for you?
I don't think we're any later than anybody else now. We have enough variation in soil types here that we can start on the lighter ground. But yeah, we don't go up there as early as we used to. When we used to work it, we were up there mid-April sometimes, and you thought it was dry, but it never really was. So now you just go when it's right.
and guys that work ground, they'll be out there working ground today so they can plant tomorrow, where we might be not doing that and planting one day later or something. But they've also spent a lot more money on tillage equipment, fuel, labor, wear and tear on it.
What about fertility management in your no-till system? Is that a different system than what you'd be doing in conventional?
Well, we do all our nitrogen is all goes through the sprayer mainly now. And we do put some nitrogen with the corn planter through the starter fertilizer just to carry it through that first few weeks. And banning the fertilizer with the corn planter, that's a big part of that too, getting it in under the ground. We still spread a lot of our potash.
When, Kevin, when does that happen?
In the fall, we spread our potash.
On what crop?
Pretty well every acre. We do soil tests here on after our wheat stubble. Not every acre, but we grid sample a lot of it, and then we cover all that ground, and then we just put removal on the corn and the soybean ground.
What about in the soybeans? Are you putting both fertilizer and seed with both soybeans and wheat when you're planting?
We don't put any fertilizer, any liquid fertilizer down with the soybeans. We put liquid alpine on the wheat, and they also put the potash and a bit of sulfamag and a little bit of MAP on pre-plant.
So not through the planter.
Behind the combine before I plant the wheat is the best, because anywhere they go, if I get ahead and plant and they come and spread the fertilizer after, anywhere them wheels drive, you can see that in the wheat.
When you think about your no-till system and how other people would be sort of resistant to look at no-till because of the hurdles, and we often hear people talk about hurdles, are there hurdles that you guys have come up against in the no-till system? Things I'm thinking about are fertilizer management. A lot of people think about no-till as being delayed planting, slow emergence, uneven crops, and then the whole aspect of soil compaction. So, do you guys identify hurdles that you've had to overcome, or has it just grown into itself?
I think there's a hurdle every spring we plant, and the guys that work ground, you drive around in June and you think, man, that looks good where they worked it. But you got to just remember that nobody combines corn in June. And then when you're out doing the wheat harvest, you can look up over them fields that are no-tilled, and they're nice and even. And some of the ones that are worked have waves on them.
So what you're saying essentially is that people identify no-till fields early on as being tough looking, but they just have to look beyond that. What about, Jason, this aspect of delayed planting, slow emergence, uneven crops? Do you guys suffer with that?
I don't think so. We might be a little bit later planting some days or some years, I guess, if it's then guys that go out and think they're drying ground, right? I don't think there's too much slow emergence. I don't know. And uneven could be a planter issue or a trash issue. Trash is probably the biggest thing with unevenness.
So that comes back to combine setup and such.
Yeah, or just getting that stuff cleaned out of the row.
One thing that surprised me in talking to no-tillers is when you don't work ground, you have good, solid ground that doesn't seem to be as susceptible to compaction, seems to carry equipment a lot more. And yet, most of you involved in no-till are quite conscious of making sure your equipment is as compaction friendly as possible. So talk to me about how your equipment is set up to address compaction in terms of tire size, tire number.
We run as big a tire as we can run,
Mhm.
and low pressure as you can on stuff. There's always room for improvement, of course. The grain buggy is probably the biggest compactor we have. We try just to keep the trucks to a small area of the field, so you know that is your spot that's going to be compacted the worst, and that you know that's where it's going to be. But the grain buggy is definitely you can see spots with it for sure.
And when you say that, Jason, are you saying you can see ruts or you can see spots in the field the next year when it's planted, even if you didn't see ruts the year before?
Yeah, not so much ruts, but just the compaction will show in the crop, especially on a path, right?
Yep.
If you're near the truck and you got a buggy full or a dump of corn or anything in the combine, dump it. Don't take it to the other end of the field to get a bin. And it maybe takes a little more time to do that, and we don't always get that. You see the auger out and you think, oh, let's go, and then coming the whole length of the farm full, and it's just for no need really.
And some of your fields are quite long.
Yeah.
So you're taking a full load all the way back. That's a lot of geography being covered.
And that's where, like the grain buggy, like some of these fields are over a mile long.
Yeah.
So on one side.
Yeah.
So the time you go all the way around that field to get it all opened up to get a path back to the truck, you've made 2 or 3 or 4 trips with the grain buggy in around that outside to get there.
So have you ever thought about setting it up to somehow have field entrances at both ends of the field?
We do have that a little bit, and we do split fields to help with that.
So when you consider all the aspects of your no-till system and recognize you've been in long enough, it's hard to compare to the neighbors because you haven't been doing that. But are there places where you think no-till is costing you, that you're losing something that others might be gaining?
I don't think so myself. You got to be a fair judge of your own crops as you are anybody else's, and I think most of this stuff, I don't know. I wish there was a way that you could find out honestly. That question's always in your mind. Are we losing something? But to go back to that erosion and all them stones.
No, I agree. With the manpower we have and the equipment we have, to go back to full tillage, and the terrain too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like pecking rocks anymore, and anybody else does either. So or working ground. It seems like such a needless thing to me.
Because I did ask you the question when I was riding with you when you were planting the cover crops, Jason, as to whether you ever got bored in these big fields with the auto steer and stuff like that.
Yeah, you need a good data plan.
But again, like here's your twin row soybeans that evolved into just a beautiful stand of soybeans. Now, granted, it's a beautiful year this year for crops and that, but good weed control, excellent uniform crops. You got to be happy with what's out there.
And we did that this year. We've been running RTK here for a few years, and we've always struggled planting soybeans between the corn rows.
Mm-hmm.
Just whether the corn planter just off a touch the year before, everything's got to be perfect. And so to plant 15-inch, you had very little room on each side of the corn row. So if the corn planter was off or the bean planter was off, you'd get planting right on the corn row, and you could see that.
Did you ever sort of do it at a 5% angle or something like that, or
Yeah,
that's
but
just a
I
pain?
hate planting on an angle too.
Okay, yeah.
But so we went to that's why we went to twin 7.5s this year, just to put those beans inside, and it worked really nice.
So you haven't had a combine through this system yet,
Right.
but you're looking like you're pleased with what you're seeing.
Yes.
And this is the first field of corn that I was out with you when you planted with the new planter, and then what it looks like after that crop comes up. A lot of people would be horrified by that much standing residue from the cover crop and that, but doesn't seem to bother you guys at all.
No, I like it.
Okay, that's what you're looking for when you drive around.
Yeah.
Gonna say, and this
The
is a picture.
weed control is tremendous on that with that cover on there.
And that's always, again, as a guy that used to be a herbicide industry person, I'm always shocked at how good the weed control can be when you're putting all that spray on that residue that then has to wash off to get into the soil to work. And it seems to work.
Yeah.
And your wheat works really well, but you make mention of the fact that you want to make sure that when you're in there with that drill, the residue's dry. Very little in the way of losing, and it doesn't seem to be costing you economically that. So, what can we say to people about what are the wins? Why do you guys keep in no-till, and what could other people benefit from by going into no-till?
A lot of the points you have listed there: less time, less labor, soil health, erosion.
What do you see that makes you think that that's working better for you than the conventional people around?
Well, like the tilth of the soil. Just anywhere we go to fix tile, you just dig. It's just like butter.
Okay.
Or a shovel in the ground. It just breaks apart so easy. Where, like, I imagine this ground, if you worked it, I was never here when they worked ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been a no-till, full tillage. But I would imagine some of this stuff could bake really tight and hard. And
Yeah, no, it's just like he says, the ground, it's held together better, but it's easier to plant into than like it used to be. When we plowed, I remember plowing and you could see the sparks at night and it would roll over in the furrow. And that's tight to make that happen, yeah. And it was hard. Like we were pulling these 210 furrow plows and you just going 4.5 mile an hour, and it was so hard to pull. It was so compacted. I don't know. I just think there's so many wins with no-till that simple way of farming.
It's funny because I'll ask the question in the next thing about changing back. And I had one of my young farmers say to me when I asked the question, tillage sounds complicated. And I just laughed. I thought, right on. Given everything that we've talked about and the successful system that you've built here, is there anything that would take you back to conventional tillage?
I don't think so, unless we lose means of weed control. Like that fears me that someday maybe we won't be able to spray.
That would really hurt no-till. And then considering everything that you've got working here on the farm, are there any next steps, or you've got it working and you're able to just carry on? Anything new on the horizon that you've seen that maybe that's something that you want to explore?
We looked at a trash whipping unit this summer. Farmer east of here has, and that looks really interesting. And that I think would help in both situations. Planted one field of our cover crop in twin rows. We've tried that before. Jason's got the RTK working really good on the drill now, and hopefully we can it would be nice to have a whipper unit to move some of that stuff.
So is that Bill and Wes Honey's
Yes.
tool? Yeah,
Mhm.
which is what Lawrence Hogan and Steve Howard have used in their biostrip till system as well, and seems very effective and really sets you up for your twin row beans between the corn rows.
yeah, get that trash
Mm-hmm.
tucked away from the bean row.
And it's not a tillage unit; it's two sets of row cleaners that
Mhm.
just push it out against the corn rows, right? Okay, so that's something that you might explore a little bit.
And it would give it a bit of air to help dry a little bit underneath that, because the corn crops are heavy now, right?
Yes, that
There's a
is
lot
quite a
of
mass.
trash. Now, we did buy a new corn header last year with the John Deere's version of the Calmer rolls, and that did help keep some of that trash a little bit tighter than the old. The other header was just the old snap, like just the opposing knives or what.
And you'd rather have that chopped and on the ground than those corn stalks standing up in terms of the no-till system? Because again, different people have told me different things about what they like to see after corn harvest.
It doesn't really chaw. It crimps it really tight, but it'll lay down on the ground and rot. A chopping head, I guess we've talked or discussed chopping heads and stuff, but we always felt that there was so much stuff laying on the ground that it would make such a mat of stuff to try and dry out.
And yeah, with these slopes and the heavy rains we get now, that a lot of that chop stuff might be all at one end of the field.
Right. Understood. Okay. So again, part of the value of this series is to give people that are looking to explore something a little bit more confidence in taking those first steps. So, any advice to others thinking about starting into exploring no-till?
One thing is good drainage. Yes, that's essential. And having your ground good and level, and get some good advice from people. When we built our first no-till corn planter, we had some really good advice from Greg Stewart. He was a John Deere salesman at that time, and he helped us set up a planter, and they told us we could spend so much a row, and I got the numbers mixed up, or somebody did, and they said go ahead for it. And then when we got the bill, it was quite a bit more, but I'm glad we made that mistake because it worked good, and that helped us. So I guess what I'm saying is do a really good job of setting up your corn planter. Like, don't go out and just try to no-till with a planter with no down pressure or very poor emergence or seed on top of the ground, and it just doesn't work.
It'll sour you to carrying on.
Stick
Yeah.
with it.
Stick with it.
Yeah.
And like, are there no-tillers that can finish up enough that they could go and do something for somebody, as opposed to trying to start no-tilling with your not really set up corn planter type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. So that brings us to the end of this session, and I just want to say thank you to the three of you here at Hunco Farms for letting me be with you the last couple of summers, taking pictures and understanding how the operation works, and then sitting down with us today to talk to us. Are you open to people giving you guys a call or a text to chat about questions they might have?
Yeah.
Okay, so folks, feel free to get in touch with any of the guys here and pick their brains. They've had it a long time and are very confident in what they're doing. So gentlemen, thanks very much for being part of Winning with No-Till.
Thank you.
Thank you.